Duke's always a gimme. Wow, this could be interesting. Could a streak come to an end on a Friday night? We shall see. We will talk about it. Of course, Florida State taking on Duke. We'll talk about the streak. We'll talk about the possibilities. We'll talk about the future, of course, which is most important for Florida State football. We get together every Wednesday night right here at the Voice of College Football. Please lock it in. Please get comfortable. Hey, check us out for the next 60. The Renegade Report, right there with George. That's a place to be, of course, on a regular basis, every day with George on the Renegade Report. George, what's going on tonight?
Man, we haven't been doing a lot of stuff over at the Renegade Report, but we did the roast on Monday. We did the show on Sunday, but took Tuesday off. Just ready to see these guys get out there and do something. It's real easy to keep complaining and kind of hammering the negative stuff, but I'm on a mission for positivity, Mark. Like, we've already said it all. It's all, it's been said. We can keep going over it and thinking of a million different things, but real easy to go back to the very first few games of the year and start talking about things that happened here and happened there. There's a lot of talk about the depth charts, recruiting. We can get all into all that stuff, but yeah, just excited for a football game on Friday. You've never lost to Duke. So either we can get a little momentum going on, build on this youth movement, have Brock get ready, take another step, see where this thing can go, or it'll be just the most viral, vicious, toxic kind of reaction from a fan base that you'll ever see. It's like one of the few streaks that's left. We've already seen like the 40-year bowl thing go away. We've seen winning seasons. There's all these different things that we lost the first 2 years of Norvell's kind of tenure here that we ate. But to be back here, yeah, to keep that streak going against Duke would be very big. I personally do think we will probably do a prediction either at the end of the show or tomorrow if we do a preview. But yeah, big game coming up this week, and all kinds of stuff we can talk about. So I'll leave it up to you, whatever you're wondering or whatever the fan base wants to hear. I'll do my best to kind of give them an idea of where things stand and what we're looking for.
Well, what we're talking about, folks, is Florida State joined the ACC in 1992. Of course, the conference split into divisions, correct me if I'm wrong, right around 2004, something like that. And they played 22 times, and Duke has 0 wins. 22 zip. I don't know if that exists in college football anywhere. With that many games played. I doubt it. Not in the Power 5. I can pretty much vouch for that. It does not exist.
Did UF have Kentucky up until recently? Was that one of the other ones? Or was that just like a 30-year streak?
Yeah, they beat them 34 straight times, but they've been playing forever. Ever. So Kentucky had all sorts of wins. Yeah, but the Florida beat them 34 straight before 2017. I think that streak ended. Now Kentucky has beat them like 6 out of 8 or something. But yeah,
let's not go down that path with Duke, hopefully.
No, you don't want to reverse it. And then, yikes. Don't see that happening, but you never know. We did see last year's game. And Duke, they're historically awful in football. There's no way getting around that. But they have put up some decent seasons recently. David Cutcliffe did a decent job there. Actually, one of those games was in the ACC championship game in 2013. So the national championship season, Duke won the Coastal. They were like an 8-4 team and took on Florida State, and that was not much of a game. 45-20 comes to mind. That might not be right, but something like that. And it wasn't even that close. But Duke's got a decent team. They're 5-1 right now. They're 1-1 in the ACC. Now they haven't played the toughest schedule in the world. They lost to Georgia Tech a couple weeks ago by 10. That's their loss. So the two teams have that in common.
What's the best win on there?
Their best win. I know they beat Northwestern non-conference. I'll have to look up their ACC win. I don't remember who that is now. Oh, they beat No. Did they beat North Carolina? We'll look at Duke.
I'm sleeping on the job. I haven't looked at it either. I will say this, though. You kind of hit on it. Like Duke made it to the ACC championship of all years in 2013. And then they have a good team last year. They blow out Clemson, and it's Florida State's 13-0 regular season, the Magic season. So that's been part of it. Kind of Duke's star has rose at the most inopportune time for them. Like they get real hot when Florida State has a national title team. Like, dang, if they could have really like put together a squad in 2019 or 2020, they might have could have taken us out. But who knows? Maybe it's this year. You can talk about recruiting and this and that, coaching stability. Well, there's 5-1, and then there's 1-5. So they got Elon. They won that one. They take out Northwestern in overtime,
I
which
saw a lot of that game. They should have lost, but yeah, they were down by a score with just a couple minutes left, and there was a big turnover, controversial play they took advantage of and won in overtime. Take it away.
Yeah, that is pretty tough. The one win over North Carolina, and they only put up 21 points. You got to feel pretty good. If they would have kept Elko, I'd be pretty negative right now. I'd be sitting here saying we'd be hard pressed to go in there and get a win. Not to say anything about, Manny's coaching or whether he's this or that. I never thought he should have got fired from Miami when he did, but yeah, Elko is just a different kind of coach right now. He's obviously hot. What he's done with A&M so quickly, having them look much better. I'd be more comfortable as an A&M fan than Jimbo's entire tenure, just off of watching his kind of beginning over there. So we'll see. They're in a bit of a rebuild situation, but again, they're 5-1 and we're 1-5. So you can you can poo-poo their wins all you want. They still got the victories.
Yeah, so Manny Diaz off to a decent start. He came in at the same time as Malik Murphy, who's the transfer quarterback from Texas, who obviously with Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers didn't have a shot, but he's a really talented guy. He's a big dude. 60%, 14 touchdowns, 5 picks. They got a running back in Star Thomas, a little over 500 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4.7 per carry, and they give it also to this Peyton Jones. They've got Jordan Moore, who's been with the team for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He leads the team with 30 catches, 3 touchdowns. They got Eli Pancol with 5 touchdown receptions. So I think of also the game, obviously, that these two teams played in Tallahassee last year. That was a really good ball game for about 3 quarters plus. Duke had a lead mid to late third quarter. Riley Leonard got hurt. Florida State stopped him at the goal line. This is one play, and I totally agree with you about Elko. That guy's a great coach. I thought he was the best hire of the offseason to Texas A&M. He's doing good work right there already this season. They're undefeated in the SEC. Just blew out Missouri. But Riley Leonard gets hurt. They got a 4th down. They're up 1 or 2 points. It was like 17-16 or something like that. And he brings in the second string quarterback, and they go for it on 4th down. And I know he wanted to go up 2 scores. And then that really puts Florida State in a bad spot. Not that the game would be won by any stretch. It was still the third quarter, but you go up 2 scores. Maybe he was trying to seize the moment. I get it, but he didn't kick the field goal to go up by like 4 or 5. And that was the turning point. And then Florida State steamrolled them after that. But it was a pretty good ball game last year.
It's been a while back. But again, it's been a while. It's been obviously at least a year since I've looked at that tape. But going back on my memory and doing the shows afterwards, I think the issue there with him and why he went for it at that point is because they weren't throwing the ball. Like their game was Riley going out there and being a baller, being a Tim Tebow and putting the team on his back. And, that's the reason he got hurt. It wasn't like he just took one random hit.
Yeah.
He was facing that D-line and he was getting lit up, but he was getting first downs. I think he recognized when he went out of the game, it's like, we got it. It's now or never. We get, like you said, get that 2-score lead. But I think he just knew that if he ever had to throw the ball with that backup, it was going to be real bad. But yeah, very good points. And again, they're 5-1. We're 1-5. I don't know how many of those players came back. I know that Manny brought a lot in. A lot went with Elko. I don't know how much we can look at that, use that to go back off of. But I think more so just this year in college football, the parity. It's hard. You can look at them and say, oh, Florida State has all this. If they lose, it'd be a nightmare. Year 1 coach versus year 5. And then you watch a guy at Vandy do what he does with all 3 stars and 2 stars on the offensive line and push Bama back. You watch Kentucky push Georgia back. You're watching a lot of teams with a lot less kind of grown man, a bunch of 5 stars and things of that nature out there. So nobody can afford to take them lightly whatsoever. I don't know. It's hard to go back and dissect how the ACC did their schedules, but it's ridiculous that we're going into week 8 and Duke's on their 3rd conference game. Miami's on their 3rd conference game. Meanwhile, Florida State and some other squads had 3 before September was over. So it leads to a lot of BS out there. It leads to like a lot of overinflation or underinflation of teams. Because all of a sudden, Georgia Tech and Florida State, a couple weeks into the year, Boston College, they're beaten up and battered and bruised. And you've got these other teams that are playing 4 and 5 out of conference games with a nice little run up to their conference game. Like, geez Louise, if Miami would have failed a Cal, what would their station be in the national polls? Here they are undefeated and they're like number 6 or 7 and the coaches in AP. Like, damn, last year they didn't put Florida State to the back until the very final second. We were in that top 4. Miami's 0, I know a lot of those guys talked a lot of crap and said FSU's this and that, but you're looking right now at how the national media looks at the ACC, and it's not very good. FSU sucks. Whole conference sucks. Meanwhile, SEC, I'm not going to argue it. They're probably the best conference team in the Big Ten, but it's like the crappy teams are still supposed to be the crappiest teams. So if the 16th and the 15th best team on the poll to start the year is beating the number 1 and number 2 teams, what does that say? Well, it's parity over there. In the ACC, it means everybody kind of sucks. So just how it is.
So I'm looking at Florida State's schedule, and this is typically the setup, but not to this extreme. So obviously Florida, when you talk about the disparity in conference games at this point, obviously most teams start playing non-conference games, and they may play all there's a lot of teams that play all their conference games, whether it's 3 or 4, and then they play all the conference games, and it's just lined up all the non-conference, then the rest of the conference games. But it's usually you dip into conference play and then maybe you back out and have another game. But for Florida State, obviously they play one of their chief rivals at the back end of the season. So that's a non-conference game. Then, correct me if I'm wrong, many years, like they did last year with North Alabama, and like they are this year with Charleston Southern, many years they play their last, well, it's not their last non-conference game because that's Florida, but they play another non-conference game before the rivalry game. And so there's 2 non-conference games at the back end of the schedule. So they've got to fit in their conference games earlier. This year, they play Notre Dame, the 3rd to last game of the season. So their final 3 games of the season are non-conference games.
And you've got 3 bye weeks in there. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, it's jacked up. It's crazy. For the most part, all ACC teams have an out-of-conference game the last week of it. That's just everybody in the conference. You go down, 90% of them, they play an SEC team or they play a team from here or there.
It's 90%.
Well, that's a hyperbole. I don't know. We've literally added 5 teams the past couple of years, so I don't know what they have.
Yeah, it's obviously the big rivalries against the SEC. It's Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Kentucky, Clemson, South Carolina.
Yeah, and then Virginia Tech plays Vanderbilt, but I don't know if that's the last week. There's a couple of different ones in there.
Virginia Tech always plays Virginia the last week of the season.
Who plays Vanderbilt? What's that dude?
Nobody. No.
Anyways.
And you got North Carolina plays NC State, and Wake and Duke have their rivalry game the last week. Anyway, the next thing I was going to hit you with all this is, do you like Friday night games?
I don't mind it, but damn, how many of them are you going to schedule in 1 year? Kind of is the thing. Like, Duke or whoever we're playing, they get this special game every once in a while, but it seems every year, like, it's good. It's great for TV. It's great when you're winning, and that's why they put us there. But when you're 1 and 5, yeah, you don't look forward to it, because everybody's watching, kind of thing. You would rather be on while 12 other games are on at noon when you're 1 and 5, and you might lose that streak to Duke. But no, normally I'm fine for it. In the past, the way they've scheduled it has been real crappy. Like, it's like you'll play on a Sunday, and then you're the Friday game turning around and stupid stuff like that. You like on a short week. But as far as how it's set up this year, I have no issue with Florida State's schedule. I just think it's kind of funny, like how far the gap has gone between, you know, you've got all these Kentuckys in the ACC now that are opening up with 3-4 weeks before they play a conference game. I think it should be split up. Like if FSU, if they are split up, then maybe that's on the administration to not take these opening ACC games. But yeah, I don't see how one team can be playing their seventh conference game and the other one's playing their third. It feels it should be somehow more compact. Whether you want to put 2 out of conference at the beginning and 2 at the end or something, it seems crazy to me to have it, such a wide margin.
Well, I get your point, but does it matter?
I don't know. I'm not making that argument. I just think it seems crazy. It does matter. Obviously, the polls. Look what happened to Florida State last year. Their entire September was thrown out. So why the hell are we playing conference games in September? You can lose your whole season in September, but as you found out last year, you damn sure can't win it. FSU comes out, they beat a top 10 at the time LSU team, a couple of lesser games, then you take out Clemson, and that's your first month, 2 ranked teams. Now, by the end of the year, they're not ranked because they lost to you instead of beating you and then losing 1 or 2 other games. So they're unranked, all these things, and you don't get credit for it. Now you look at a Miami team who is kind of the opposite. They started with a bunch of easy games and got in their conference schedule late, and they struggled in both games. So, that's why they're 6 or 7 in the poll. Maybe they can climb up. I don't know which is better or worse. Just seems to me like the conference should have something to where it's not so crazy. I've said the same thing about the SEC. Like, how crazy is it that Florida has the schedule it has every year? It has to play Florida State. It has to play this team from the other side in Kentucky until they changed it with the no divisions so much mattering. Kentucky would start off with 4 cupcakes and play Florida every year like a freight train because they've just been preparing for Florida for a whole year. So I would say to Florida fans, why don't y'all go to a 9-game conference schedule? Y'all are going to play Florida State every year. It just gives Kentucky and the rest of these teams in the SEC who are scheduling cupcakes, it would even things out. So that's kind of why I was happy with the doing away with conferences in the ACC, because it wouldn't have, the Coastal has an easy schedule every year and the Atlantic has a hard one. That's basically what we had for a decade or more. So it's evened that out to a certain extent, but yeah, there's always going to be things, that are weird and wonky.
Who are Florida State's permanent rivals besides Miami?
That would be Clemson, Miami, and the third one may be Syracuse. Not that it's a rival, just one of the 3 teams you play every year.
Did you play every year?
I'd be mistaken on that, but I know for sure Clemson. I don't know. I think maybe Syracuse is the third one.
I'd really have to dive into the ACC schedule. So everything you just stated about the divisions and the screw ups with the ACC and the SEC, I thought they both did a horrible job of scheduling once they divided these conferences into divisions. There's no reason that Texas A&M needs to play South Carolina every year just because they have nobody else to give them to. Like, don't schedule a game, and so forth and so on. And to your point, the Atlantic being so much better than the Coastal, and then Florida State and Miami play every year, which of course they have to play. I get that they should play, but then you're giving the most difficult team to Florida State. Not every year were they the best team, but they're going to be largely the most talented team in that division, and Florida State has to play them on top of everybody from the Atlantic division. Yeah, and you had a series of years, obviously, better than anyone, where Clemson and Florida State are the 2 best teams, and they're playing in September, usually early October, and that's the game of the year in the ACC, and one of them is pretty much behind the 8 ball then, and they're never going to make it to the conference championship game. So that's largely been taken care of if they're scheduling correctly. I take a glance at SMU's schedule and I'm thinking they were given some leeway here. Now, I know Florida State obviously is the big letdown. They weren't the team that they were supposed to be. So SMU's schedule would have opened Florida State, Louisville, but they took care of Louisville, and then suddenly, boom, the week before that, they handled Florida State unexpectedly. in terms of a preseason outlook. And suddenly they've cleared the two toughest hurdles in terms of preseason look, Louisville and Florida State. And now they've got a nice little run here to the ACC championship game if they can take care of business.
And that's the whole issue of adding the 3 extra teams. Like, you had a hard enough time putting together, and this goes into the whole thing. If you want to talk conference alignment, if ESPN wants to go forward with the ACC, et cetera, it just diluted it to such a level. There's only so many teams, only so many schedules can you put Florida State on. And that's 8, because that's how many ACC games are played. So how many teams does that leave that Florida State doesn't play every year? 7. And 3 of those teams they play every year. So how many teams does it actually leave? 4. How many times does it take you to get through those, the 12 teams or whatever that's not on your list if it's only 4 a year? 3 years. So a lot of these teams are playing once every 3 years. So if you're Louisville or you're this team that doesn't have Clemson as your every year rival, you're only playing them once every 3 years. And if you're lucky enough to get Florida State and Clemson in the same year, then they're not on it. You don't have either one of them for 2 years. So it's tough. There's no perfect solution. The perfect solution is having parity and having, somewhat of similar teams. As a Florida State fan, you can't really complain about parity when you lost to, some of the worst teams in the conference. But we all know how this thing works. 1 year does not a program make. So it's just tough. And the biggest thing is the College Football Playoff Committee. I mean, with how they've got Miami right now, they're sitting there and telling you there's one team from the ACC going to make it, period. That's just how it's going to go. I don't see any scenario. The only scenario I could see where 2 people get in, I don't like what's Miami going to be ranked when they get to the conference championship game and they lose? Like how hard?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. If Miami goes 12-0,
they're out. They lose
and loses the conference championship game. You think they're out?
They're out. I mean, there's 2 teams with 1 loss ahead of them now. What happens when they have 1 loss? How many 1 loss ahead of them goes ahead of them then? How many 2 loss goes ahead of them with 1 loss? You've got 4 auto spots.
Miami teams can make the playoffs.
Right. You got 4 auto spots. That goes to the conference championship. So they don't win, they're out of that. At least 7 spots remaining. One of those goes to a G5.
Well, there's 8 spots remaining and 1 goes to a G5.
I got ahead of myself. When you take off the G5, that makes 7 spots remaining.
Yep.
You only got that's with 1 from the Big Ten and 1 from the SEC.
Yep.
I don't see it. I don't see how they're going to get over Alabama and Georgia and LSU and Oregon and Ohio State and Michigan. It'll never happen. We'll see.
You might be right. I haven't really sized it up exactly, but
you're undefeated and you're number 6 or 7. We were number 3, number 2, number 4 this time last year. Granted, we had a tougher schedule. It's just, who are they going to lose to is the question. Maybe if Pitt goes undefeated and they're undefeated.
Miami loses to, pick your team, Pitt or Clemson, let's say. Miami's undefeated. They're 6 or 7 right now. That's in the AP poll. So we don't know what the college football playoff ranking is going to be, but let's say it's roughly the same.
Worse. It goes the other direction.
Depending on what's going on.
If you're looking at the data
in the country.
The AP goes and the coaches tend more to like the BCS, like how Florida State should be. And this is just talk, this isn't, we'd have to really go look through it all. But from what I've seen as a Florida State fan, the AP and the coaches much more to what actually, the BCS era, your conference champion, you're undefeated, all this. The college football playoff is nope. Oh, well, they played Virginia Tech close and they did this and we're just going to put them. The college football playoff, what they did to Alabama and Florida State last year and Georgia, like there was no formula there. There was no, oh, you did this and you do that. They just unilaterally decided that, oh, well, we think Georgia's the best team, but we can't put them in, so we'll put them 5. And we'll drop, it's like, lose me with it. I know this is a kind of a round and round conversation. It's just, they talked about it on the roast a little bit. I just don't see, who does Miami have left on their schedule? Like, because we've seen these conversations when they happen. It's all about who did you beat, who did you beat, and there's going to be 2 or 3, 4 or 5 teams in the SEC that are going to have better resume than Miami if they have 2 losses versus 1. Now, this isn't my belief, but this is what the college football playoff and what the money has decided. That's why they're fighting for 8 auto selections and all those things.
Yeah. I'm not saying this for sure, but I'm just saying that, yeah, I'd really have to size it up to figure out, okay, if Miami's 12-0 and they're going to the ACC championship game, they're going to be in the top 4 or 5 in the nation, minimum. And then they lose to whoever, Pitt, Clemson, and they don't lose 45-3. They lose by a field goal, a touchdown, whatever, that they're going to drop to number 12 in the country.
Florida State won and dropped. If Florida State wins and drops a couple places, because they won the ACC championship, and against a Louisville team that I don't think there's a team with a defense as good as that Louisville team in the conference this year. I don't think there's a good team that's as good as FSU was last year. Clemson, even though they got their stuff together, they still got blown out, to UGA to start the year, and a UGA that isn't even that great. And I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm telling you what Kirk Herbstreit and all those people will be saying. I can hear it now. I'll be laughing this year because it's Miami, but they dug their own grave. It's like at every turn, all these schools were, oh yeah, FSU sucks. Yeah, they're right. Playoffs right. When we're good, we'll be taken care of. It's like, but you'll find out. And God forbid they lose one in the regular season and then win the conference. Then they'll get in, and we'll get to see what happens. But we'll see. Is that James? We got somebody else joining us?
Yeah, Chris Frazier from Spear Adams jumping on. Chris, good to have you here.
How y'all doing?
Doing well. I don't know if you've picked up on this conversation. We can certainly give you a say if you'd like to continue it before we change directions. We were just talking about, what were we talking? We were first talking about ACC scheduling. We were talking about, of course, Florida State and Duke, and that Florida State has this oddity of playing 3 consecutive non-conference games at the end of the schedule because they usually play 2 with Florida and a walkover kind of game like they have in recent years. Charleston Southern this year, North Alabama last year, but Notre Dame's that third to last game. And then we started talking about the oddity of ACC scheduling and then moved into the playoff race with Pitt, Clemson, and Miami possibly representing the ACC. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about any of that, Chris.
Miami, Clemson, Pitt, get it while it's good. Do what you can while you can. Everybody keeps stating the facts that, Florida State's not the team that they were based off of the portal. We didn't regime the guys out of the portal that we did the previous 2 years that you talked about. Not Clemson, obviously. Clemson's just going to have a lot of senior out after this year. I don't think a lot of people are talking about it enough, so they need to do what they can while they can, because unfortunately they don't have the top talent out of high school that they've been getting. They're doing all right in recruiting, but they're not doing what they've done in the previous years of the national championships. So they need to do what they can this year in representing the ACC and representing their school, because this new age of college football, it's different. A lot of people are looking at Florida State. I'm going to keep it about Florida State. It's just, I ain't talked about them enough here lately, so I'm going to keep it about them. But a lot of people see that you lose 2 wide receiver recruits that were, top-end guys. Everybody was extremely excited about them. But then you see Florida State pick up a couple of offensive linemen. And that, I think people need to pay attention to that. And I don't think there's, a whole lot of lines to read in between, but you offer the trenches the money. That's what just happened. You didn't take away. It's not like you called the 2 wide receivers and said, hey, we're not going to pay what we said we were going to pay, blah, blah, blah. That's not the case. The case is that you've got a quarterback situation in Florida State that's in question. You got young guys that are recruits are like, who's going to be the quarterback next year? Is Brock going to be good enough? Is Luke going to step up? Are they going to bring in another portal guy? You have questions at the quarterback position. It's hard to hold on the top talent wide receivers. Plus, you pay attention to what Florida State's got already with Elijah Moore, Dwayne McCoy, Gibson, and so on. that are already going to be on. If you retain them the way you're supposed to, those young wide receivers are going to be your guys next year. Which Landon Thomas being the tight end, he's a true freshman out there, and he's made more plays than Morlock and so on. Then you got Brian Courtney, another. I think he might be a redshirt sophomore, something to that nature. He's making plays at the tight end position, whereas you thought you had a veteran guy and Morlock that was going to come back and kill it for you. Unfortunately, his name's been switched to more drops, so you're going to start playing the youth. There's going to be a youth takeover, kind of already has been, but now the question comes into play of who's your quarterback going to be next year, and it's what's going to be appealing to wide receivers in the recruiting class. Unfortunately, it's not going to be too appealing to the ones in 2025. It's going to have to be appealing to the ones in 2026, but you're not really in dire need of getting a bunch of wide receivers out of high school because of the ones that you've already gotten there. So instead of spending X amount of dollars on getting specific wide receivers in this class, you're going to spend those X amount of dollars into getting trench players like as an offensive lineman that Florida State's done. They've held on to, depending on who you look at, the 5-star Solomon Thomas on on 3, and then 4-star is what he dropped to on 247. Asked 247 why he dropped to a 4-star. Obviously, like the rest of them I've asked about over the years, I never get an answer. So for whatever reason, it is what it is. But you're dropping on Solomon Thomas. You're trying to hold on, to a lot of these guys that are in the skill positions. You're about to add another running back in this class. You've already got one, and Florida State's about to add another. He'll be announcing soon enough. And then you've got another wide receiver out of the state of Kentucky that might be a guy that goes ahead and commits to Florida State in the next couple of days. They're doing really well in places that people were disappointed in and earlier in recruiting this season. And now you're watching a couple of guys fall off, so it released some money. And that may be off the display of, hey, wait a minute. I thought we had better at this position than that position. We don't. So let's offer those, advocates to these positions versus the ones that we had added them to in the previous statement. So I think that Florida State's doing a really good job at trying to recruit what's necessary and what's needed. I'm really happy with what they're doing as far as the youth movement goes. You're fixing to have Otto early. You're going to have quite a few young offensive linemen start in this game. They played the majority of last week, or not last week, we went on bye week, but the week before his game. And Landon Thomas did a really good job. Courtney did a really good job. Williams at tight end did a good job. Those are all 3 tight ends. They did better than the guy that's in front of them that's supposed to be the veteran. I think that Wayne McCoy was open about 72% of the time. He just didn't get targeted like he should have been. I think that Florida State's going to put a lot of things together versus Duke. It's going to be something we haven't seen yet. Now the question is can these young guys go out and execute it? Because I think that they're going to make sure they give them the opportunity in the skill positions to make these types of plays. It's just, are they going to make youth mistakes? Are they going to make true freshman errors? Are they going to, are they going to do what they can with when their number got called? Because their number's been called, so we'll see what happens.
Talk Florida State football with all of you every week. We got George here. We got Chris here. George, any thoughts about the youth movement or recruiting?
Yeah, kind of what you said at the beginning before I get into that about, Clemson and their need to because they're very senior and upperclassmen led. They're going to lose a lot of seniors going to the draft. That's my biggest pet peeve about the opening statement everybody wants to make when you try to talk about recruiting in our schedule. It's year 5 and we have these problems. It's year 5. Was I born yesterday, or is it always year 5 when the rebuild happens? Hasn't the 4-year, that's always when it happens? One of these things. And Chris he nailed it when he described how this team is recruiting right now. It's exactly how they recruited last year and the year before. And that's the problem. Not good enough for Florida State. But that's something that can't be changed till after the season. So when he's talking about the different guys that have decommitted and who they're focused on and things of that nature, I would say, as he said, without having to spell it out, it could tell you give you a pretty good idea who the staff means to keep this offseason. You're not going to sign the best linebacker class in the country with a lame duck. That's all I'll say on that. But no, I agree with everything he said. Really excited, to see what the youth movement looks like against Duke. It's been getting better and better every week. How more drops is still at the top of the depth chart. I think that's just a mess with fans because he wasn't even on the field hardly the last game. He's still up there, but 40 and 18 at tight end. I'm hoping that they're going to lean on Toafili earlier than they have been, but I have no reports from the staff or anything. I think it's ridiculous. He averages 4.8 yards a carry and can't get one on first down. So we'll see what happens with him. I want to see, and even if it's not him, maybe I'm just hip to Toafili. But if we're only going to tote the rock 20 times, I don't want 6 different running backs toting it. So that's kind of narrow the rotations, go with the youth, like Chris said. Keep hitting that offensive line. I think this offensive line class is the single most important part of any of this. The coaching hires, all of it. You have to get something in there to build a foundation with, or bring 40 of them in the transfer portal or whatever the case may be. But yeah, just a ton of hope for Duke. Don't want to put any lies out there, but I'm curious what Chris thinks about it. This is something that I pointed out. I mean, you started out 17-0. We wanted to see that from Brock against SMU, but it took 17-0 before he calmed down, the offense calmed down, the defense calmed down, and you had a pretty good game. It was Florida State 13-12 after that point. If you want to liken that back to Louisville, where you outscore them in the second half and still lose that game, maybe we can see that, get that confidence out of a young Brock Glenn, same age as a Jordan Travis, or maybe a year younger than Jordan Travis was in 2021. If that's what we can do, go 500 or 3-2 on the back half of the schedule, play spoiler, I'd be as happy as a pig in mud. And yeah, we talked a lot about Danielle Pierre-Lewis and Mario Nash. I think me and Chris have been telling everybody for a year they would commit. And we got those two, along with the other guys he mentioned, Peyton Joseph and Solomon Thomas. Damn good offensive line class. So the people out there hollering, this guy has to go and this and that, find a place for him and keep that class together. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that you're seeing on the youth movement wise, as far as Early and Otto and even Armella, you're going to see a lot of those offensive linemen in this specific game against Duke. And the reason that you're seeing that is because Florida State had made a big statement, which I'd been screaming about it the week before, that I think that you should put these young guys in because the guys that you have ahead of them, the veterans like Byers and so on. Now, Byers came back from an injury. He's out of shape, blah, 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 whatever. Whatever excuses need to be made for why someone's not doing their job, I could care less about. But the truth of the matter is Florida State offensively has been struck. Like everybody keeps talking about the defense. It's not that it's played the defense that Florida State's played over the past 2 or 3 years, but it's played good enough. If you can hold a team to 21 points, you're supposed to win that football game. That's how I see it, especially in today's age. So if you can hold a team to 21 points, you're supposed to win the football game. Florida State's biggest issue to me this year in totality is not being able to establish the run. You try to establish the run in the first half, doesn't work out well. The only game that you've won this season is the game that you established the run in time of possession. It's what needs to be and what needs to happen. So you're seeing a lot of guys like Byers and so on get pulled out. Ferguson, they're not going to start, and everybody's like, "Was it because they're hurt?" No, they're not hurt. They're not injured at all. The youth guys proved that we could establish a run better with them than the gentleman that was in front of them. So you're gonna have to see if we can establish a run with this youth movement. I believe that we can. I think that they have a better ability of opening up holes for the running backs. I think that Toa Philly's going to get his opportunities based off of what he does. But I think that Cam Davis is going to be a big proportion of what happens as far as establishing the run. You're going to beat them down a lot with that big body running back. Even though he is a true freshman, he's extremely hard to take down. When he pops you, you know it. So I think that this is, what we've seen in practice over the bye week and then what we saw this week leading up to the game so far. And for Norvell to make that move and Atkins to make that move as soon as they did, as far as stating Early starting, Otto starting, blah, 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 that tells me that those guys, when their number was called at practice, I want to see if we can establish the run with you gentlemen. Then they were able to do better than the guys that were in front of them, and they were able to do it early. And because it didn't change and has not changed throughout the weeks thus far, It should be a much better outing as far as the running game goes. It sure the hell needs to be. So I think that Florida State's making the right calls. Plus, you people need to pay attention to this. This is why I called for it 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever you want to say. Um, I called for the youth movement as far as every position goes, because now it comes down to retaining your roster. The last thing that you need to see is Otto leaving, early leaving, Landon Thomas leaving, Brock or Luke leaving. So these guys need to be put on the field because and this goes for defense too. I am just naming offensive players. Our defensive youth has done a phenomenal job, in my opinion. They've had a couple of freshman mistakes on some of the blown coverages, but they weren't out athlete. They were just out smart, based off of they're freshmen. That this is going to happen. So they've done a really good job though. Edwin Joseph, Conrad Hussey, so on and so on. I think they've done a great job. Is in their first year. Conrad being in his second, didn't play a whole lot last year, but he played enough. I think he's been one of the better safeties so far. I think Edwin's done a really good job. I think a lot of the youth guys got pissed off, being completely honest. There was a lot of accountability called for. A lot of the young guys started calling for the old guys in their accountability. Said, "You're not doing this. Isn't what I came to Florida State for. And if this is how you're going to treat every Saturday or every game day, then coach, look at me because I'm going to give you the best that I fucking got. And it might not be perfect. And it might not be the most crisp football that you've ever seen played, but it will be 10 times the effort that you're seeing out of these guys." People don't believe this conversation's happened. They've lost their mind because you've got Edwin Joseph at practice screaming, "If you don't want to be here, then go home. Because I want to be here. This is where I want to be." So, and that happened a multitude of times. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna justify this. We'll say um, this possibly did not happen. But there was a player-led practice last week. There was a player-led practice the week before. There's been a player-led practice this week thus far. Um, and these guys are knocking the out of each other, and they're doing their own film breakdown together as a team, instead of just their room getting their film broke down like it's already been sized down. So this is what the defensive line did or didn't do. This is what the DBs did or didn't do. They're getting to see it in totality because they're not understanding how is this guy getting to this level. Y'all are saying what we didn't do. My problem is I came up on the play because of this, and now instead of that, you're seeing the totality of how the defense is working, and it gets guys to be able to hold other guys accountable, and that's exactly what they did. And then your best defense was played against Cal, your best offense was played against Cal, and it's sad because it could have been much better. I think if you were to give Brock Glenn 2-3 games prior to moving forward with putting him out versus Clemson, you could have been very competitive in that Clemson game. You might not have won it, but you might have had a better chance if this young man's first game of the season coming off the bench wasn't playing against the best defensive line that they're probably going to see this year. So it is what it is. I think Florida State might be a little bit late, pulling the trigger on the youth, but better late than never. Because to me, this is about retaining the future of your program, and the future of your program is about to play against Duke come in a few days. So I think that they're doing what needs to be done. I want all the Florida State fans. I haven't been on in a while, so y'all forgive me. I am long-winded right this second, but I want everyone to understand the amount of coaching differences that you're going to see after the season ends. There's a multitude of guys that's already been talked to. There's a multitude of guys that are already saying yes. At the end of the season, they want the job. There's been a multitude of analysts because now analysts, per NCAA rule that was changed, can now coach on the field. There's a lot of analysts, as in like the Kenny Shaws, I'm not going to say Derek Brooks because I think that's a long shot, but gentlemen that played here and did extremely well. People like Marvin Jones Sr. and his son's playing here. What happens if that becomes your linebacker analyst or your defensive analyst that can help coach linebackers, and you've got Ernie Sims also coaching? People act like Marvin Jones don't have coaching experience. He went and won the championship in whatever arena football league is supposed to be the best one. Yeah. But you got all these guys that are wanting to make Florida State what it once was and continue that growth from there. And it's not like they're coming in just as a player or a former player. They're coming in with a lot of coaching experience and won something also outside of just the winning games as a player. So I think that Florida State's movement as far as who they're going after, there's specific things that may or may not happen with a GM. At Florida State, there's certain things that will definitely happen when it comes to linebacker. There are certain things that are going to happen when it comes to the defensive line coaching situation. I'm not telling you that Odell's going anywhere. I am not telling you that they're getting rid of him. I'm telling you that he might be getting the exact thing that Florida State needs, not just what Odell needs. And all that is a little bit of help. Just give him a little bit of help on the recruiting side of it because he can develop the crap out of them. So just get the guys in there that can be developed. So he's going to get a little bit of help there. You're going to hire a new high school relations recruiting coordinator because you got rid of I can't even remember his name now, and that's sad because I really liked him. His name is just escaping me. But you're going to see quite a few hires from Florida State and quite a few let goes because they're going to replace a lot of analysts and also add analysts because of how many that you can have now. And you're going to see, like they did with Middle Tennessee's head coach, him coming to be whatever he is now. You're going to see a lot of that, but you're going to see names that you already know might not be based off of their coaching, but some of them you're going to remember and you're going to recognize based off of they coached against us when they coached with the Gators. They coached against us when they coached with LSU, yada, so on and so on. Yes, read between the lines because those two specific teams are somebody that they coached for. There's specific coaches that are coaching for Miami right now that you will see on Florida State staff come next season. Whether people want to believe it or not, I don't care. I can tell you that I know what's getting offered to them, and I know that ain't getting offered to them where they're at. And one of them is a former Nole anyway and wants to be here anyway. He's got his experience where he's at, and that's at the University of Miami. So mark my words and watch. Come the end of the season, there's going to be a specific guy that we all miss. All loved what he did here as a player, love what he's done as a coach, and you can't keep missing out on people that can prepare your program to be elite. And I think recruit at a very high level. And I think that's what Florida State's marching toward. And I think that they're doing a good job of analyzing who that is and how all these people will mesh together. Because I tell people if you want to win national championships, the janitors that clean the locker room have to be elite. It's just the way this is. Every team that I've ever watched win top to bottom or go wire to wire or whatever the things is that Florida State's done over the years, or the Ohio States or the Alabamas or the Georgias, they have pristine everything. Everybody does their job at the highest level, and they would compete with anyone and say that anyone could do it as good as them. Right now, Florida State's missing a few key pieces on both sides, whether it be on the field, off the field, in the locker room, as a janitor, whoever the cook lady is, so on and so on. They're missing a few pieces. They add those pieces, then Florida State will start doing what it's supposed to. Now, keeping those pieces is what's most important once you get them, because Florida State knows what it feels like to get to the top. Even though we didn't get our opportunity, winning 13 football games last year should not be forgotten because this year is so crappy. You can't forget what they did last year. So to get back to that point, you've got to do what? You've got to put pieces together that are going to make this work. And right now there's pieces where people got complacent, lazy, and thought that this was just once you get to the top, it keeps rolling. The greatest coaches that I've ever heard speak, as in Bobby Bowden. I'm going to throw Nick Saban in there because you can't question that he is or isn't. I think he has got to be considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest. Bryant, all of them that are great, made very few statements about being a loser, being willing to accept a loss, things to that nature. You have to pay attention to who's coaching and then how it feeds down to the rest of the guys. And then they talked about complacency. Once you become complacent, once you get to the top, getting to the top is hard enough. It's staying there is the hardest part. Staying at the top, always being everyone's target, because teams start finding ways or coaches start finding ways. The only team they're worried about beating that year is you. You've seen it year in and year out with the Georgias, the Tennessees, the whomevers have had to play Alabama, and they're looking to win that one game that year because if they think they can beat them, they'll beat anybody. But they prepare so much for just that one team that this team that runs more RPO or yada yada gets them because they're sleeping. Any of that mix doesn't matter. What I'm trying to get at is complacency is something that's set forth with Florida State this year. It's unfortunate, but you have to pay attention to the non-execution that's been done on the field. You've got guys that are more worried about going on vacation in the Bahamas or to fucking Jamaica or whatever, and instead of grilling down, grinding, and doing what's necessary, being a leader for this team. So the young guys said, "Okay, you want to go on a vacation? I'm going to be the one that steps up." And now people are coming back and they don't have their starting position. They're not starting this week. They're probably not starting next week. But that is not the only reason that they're not starting. And I didn't want to even start or even end up with that. But the fact of the matter is they got replaced the week before anybody knew they was going on any type of trip. So it had nothing to do with that, why they actually lost their spot. But that probably didn't help them. It probably didn't help their case at all. But the sky's not falling. Florida State University is not on fire. This is not a curse because of what happened last year. All of the things that fans want to put together. No voodoo doll came and did anything to Florida State. There's none of that. It's just year 5, and we had one really good year, and the year before that was really decent. And it is what it is. Now we got to take the bad with the good. We've had good. Now we're getting bad. As soon as we get beyond that point of understanding that this shit's going to happen in college football, not just to Florida State, but to other teams as well. If Georgia is as elite as they have been, no. If you pay attention to the last time they won a national title, to the time before that, how many years is in between the last or the first national title and this last time they didn't win one? How many years is in between the two? That question needs to be asked. The question of who was still on the team from the first national title team to the next one, yada, yada, so down, so down. So I want people to pay attention to this is how Georgia doesn't look elite every year. It happens. Alabama does not look absolutely elite. Oh, they got a new head coach. They got 84% of the roster that returned. So I don't want to hear that they don't have enough Jimmys and Joes because everybody knows that's a lie. It's going to happen. Miami did not look anything last year like they look this year. So the portal does, it giveth and it taketh. And so far, Florida State had an unfortunate measure of taketh because it went to the NFL, and we did not replenish the way that we thought we could. And it is what it is. And now we got to finish out the season with these youth, and let's see what Florida State can do for the rest of the season. 2 wins, 3 wins, whatever it is.
You can find your Florida State amongst some youth. If you can find 40 guys to go to war with next year, and you can, pull another 40 in via high school and portal, you're just fine. And to what Chris said about the portal, giveth and taketh. Yeah. And another thing, that wasn't just the 2023 portal class that went 13-0 to what he said. No, that was the 2019 portal class, the 2020 portal class, 21, 22, and 23 combined. Those are all the different portal classes that went in the draft. Darian Jones was hated here his first couple of years on campus. Fabian Lovett, Jordan Travis. You go down the line. You had your Fisks and your Colemans that were guys that came in one class, but no, it's year 5. It is what it is. And yeah, I agree with it. Thank you for filling some time. I don't think me and James even let Mark speak a sentence last week, so no, we appreciate it.
I opened the show and I closed the show, so that's fine with me because people need to hear from you. So George, what's going on at the Renegade Report?
As I said earlier, it's been kind of wonky with the bye week and everything going on. We've got a Friday game, so we won't have a Friday show. I'm not sure. We'll either do a show for a preview tomorrow or maybe do a preview show before the game. We'll see. But, of course, we'll have the post-game show simulcast right here at the Voice of College Football, and then get back to the regular Sunday, Tuesday, Friday schedule next week.
Chris, what's up at Spiratics?
Well, we're trying to get back into the mix of things, period. It's not necessarily the bye week that messed me up. I got a lot of stuff going on in 2024, but it is, what it is. I'm not going to sit there and cry about it. Got to keep moving forward and pushing. Every time I turn around, I got something else to do, but we do have a show tonight at 8. It's not normal. It's kind of a pop-up thing. I didn't have a choice. Couldn't do one last night, so I have the opportunity to do one tonight. It's pretty obvious. If I jumped on here, then that means I have time to do another one, right? All right. So tonight at 8 Eastern will be on. I'll probably do something similar to what George said. I don't know if I'm going to do a show tomorrow as a preview or if I'm going to do a show the day of before the game. either way, the biggest thing that we've been doing at Spirit Addicts is we gained enough money for 53 young men and women to go to the first Florida State game, which was really nice. We're going to do that for the North Carolina game. And we also helped a lot of hurricane relief stuff out with that as well. It was a fundraiser that we put together, and it did really well. So really proud of that, really proud of all the fans for supporting it. The biggest thing that I can say that we've done is created an Ultimate Chief info room on Discord. And I made it pricey, but it seems like our fans don't care. And there has yet to be one person out of, I don't know how many is in the Ultimate Chief room right now. But it's $25 a month or $300 for 2 years. And that is a big difference because it's $300 a year if you do 25 a month for 12 months. So I can give you 2 years or whatever it is. The deal is for $300 for the same price of one if you paid it each month. So far, more people are going with the 2-year deal than they are the 1-year deal. So Spirit Addicts has started to make a pretty good amount of money, but the biggest part of it is I basically got people signing a NDA almost. Not quite as much as that, but I don't want you sharing that information anywhere. And then nobody has. They've done a really good job. One of my guys that helped build apps makes sure you can't screenshot things and things of that nature. So proud of that. People are having fun again, and I'm getting to talk about Florida State again, so I'm pretty excited.
Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football on a Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Chris, thanks for dropping by. Always appreciate you. George, thanks for holding things down as always. Take advantage, folks, of Spirit Addicts right here on YouTube, and of course, the Renegade Report. Guys, we'll make it happen next week as well. Enjoy the game. It's Friday night, everyone. Remember, Friday night against Duke to get to 23-0 against those guys. We'll see you next week.